Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Spear, pronouns he, him, and I direct events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of Danté Stewart's debut book, Shoutin in the Fire, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after over 94 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third generation owner Nancy Bass Whiten. We want to thank all of you for your support of our loyal community of book lovers, the time of authors like Dante and Kiese. We wouldn't be here today, and we are so truly appreciative of all of you. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us Danté Stewart for the launch of his book, Shoutin in the Fire, An American Epistle. Danté Stewart is a speaker and writer whose work in the areas of race, religion, and politics has been featured on CNN, in the Washington Post, Christianity Today, Sojourners, The Witness, A Black Christian Collective, Comment, and elsewhere. He received his BA in sociology from Clemson University and is currently studying at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Joining Dante in conversation tonight is Kiese Laymon. Born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi, Kiese, Ottilie Schillig Professor of English and Creative Writing at the University of Mississippi, is the author of the novel Long Division and a collection of essays, How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America. He is also the author of the memoir Heavy, shortlisted for the Andrew Carnegie Medal and the Kirkus Prize, and which was named one of the best books of 2018 by The Undefeated, New York Times, Publishers Weekly, NPR, Broadly, Library Journal, The Washington Post, Southern Living, Entertainment Weekly, San Francisco Chronicle, and the New York Times Critics. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dante and Kiese to the stage.
Hey, what up? What up? What up? Man, let me say something before we get started. First of all, I feel so happy to be here with you, my brother. I'm gonna tell people a few things about you they may not know throughout tonight, and I want to encourage y'all to put your questions in the chat. But when Dante was writing this book, Dante would hit me periodically with like passages from the book, that were written. But every now and then, 3 times to be exact, Dante would read passages to me on the phone, and they always came at the right time when life was whipping my ass. So I thought it would be dope if we started tonight with you reading a passage from Shoutin in the Fire, and then I want to get into it, if that's all right with you.
Hey, that's cool, big bro. And so good to be with you, bro. I'm ready. I'm excited. So, all right. So we in COVID. This is a COVID moment. I was giving an interview the other day, and they was like, yo, like, you talk about your grandma, you talk about your daddy, you talk about your granddaddy, you talk about black folk, you talk about white folk, you talk about young folk, you talk about old folk. Who you want to start with talking about? Where you want to start? And so I told him, I was like, all right, let's go home. So, all right, let's go home real quick. Hey, Ma, I said as I told her about my plans to visit church. How's Bishop doing? He's not well, she told me. I could tell her voice was changing and wasn't good. You need to come back and see Bishop, she said. I am. When? I'll make a trip over the next few days. Let me see how COVID going to pan out and I'll come, I told her. Okay, make sure you come now. All right, I will. I love you. I love you too, son. I never got to see Bishop. He died before I got to. When I heard the news, I felt a deep regret. It wasn't just because I didn't get to see him. It was because I didn't get to tell him how much I appreciated him and loved him for all the ways he really tried to love me, by filling up the gas when I came home, by slipping me a few dollars for groceries, by asking about me, by telling my mama and my daddy how proud he was that I made it out. And I had made good on the lessons that he taught us. I knew what they had gone through, what this country had made them, and how they did not believe it. I knew that he tried to really love us, and I never got to tell him thank you. His last memory of me was playing football at Clemson University, returning back home over the years, slowly moving further and further away, and never returning again. My last memory of him, me walking into the church to see his cold, weary, dead black body, just like my uncle's cold, weary, dead black body, just like Alton's cold, weary, dead black body. just like Philando's cold, weary, dead black body. I walked up to his body. I put my hand on his hand. I whispered to myself a little prayer. Somehow I needed to honor him and to keep his memory alive in my heart. I needed to show him that I learned, a little too late though, but I had learned what it meant to have Black faith and what it meant to love us deeply. I told him how much I had learned, how much I had seen his face in the faith with such brutality. I had really learned, though it was too late. I took my hand off him. I walked out of the door and my grandmother asked me to take her home. On the way home to our house, we started laughing over stories of Bishop, stories of ourselves, stories of this country. We laughed and we laughed and we laughed and we laughed. I dropped her off, told her I loved her, then I headed back home. On my way home, I cried because that was normal. That was faith. Things impossible can become reality. Things oppressive can become just. Things unlovable can become new. Things dead can become alive. The meaning was in the living, the moving, and the having our being. You know, I used to think talking about Black life or even Black faith was about convincing white people to be better, but that's far too limiting. No, I've learned that talking about Blackness is about giving us words, setting our bodies free, living in ways that we feel seen, inspired, and protected. It's about a deep love, the kind that sees what our ancestors did for us, the kind that enables us to be the kind of ancestors they were to us and who we want to become. It is about speaking deeply to our trauma and bringing out the complexity and the beauty. After all, we human. It's not about triumph as much as it is telling our story. Life is not just fight, it is love. The way we showed up around the dinner table, praise breaks and shout tracks, prayer meetings smelling like musk and perfume, the anointed oil pressing my forehead with the sign of the cross, basketball games on dirt courts, Olympics on concrete, livers and hot sauce, choir meeting up at Ryan's after church conventions, being in church singing all types of songs, learning all types of Bible stories, our heads being grasped by sweaty hands as they pray for our futures, our bodies being held as tight as newborn babies. We were not concerned about what white people thought in those moments. We were too busy living.
You had to take us home before we get going. You had to take us home. I'm glad we started at home, fam. Man, we gonna circle back to some of those mornings when you were blessing me with I just call it the text, bro. Like the text was coming alive, but I want to start in a place that might seem strange. You know, whenever we talk, I'm reminded that like I played sports, you know what I'm saying? Like I played basketball in college, I played football and basketball in high school. But there's a difference between, you know, niggas who played and motherfuckers who was balling, right? And so you balled, like you didn't just ball D1, you balled at the best football school in the country. And you helped make that school the best football school in the country. But I'm interested, Dante, in how you feel right now in this moment of celebration. How does the feeling of celebrating your book launch feel compared to the feeling of like athletic sort of like accomplishment?
Yeah, bro, great question, yo. I was talking to my wife today and I told her I was getting on my truck and I told her, I looked back at her, I was like, yo, babe, like, yo, this is everything I would have imagined it would be had I made it to the league.
Whoa.
You know, for so long, you know, we had these league dreams and things like that. And really at the heart of so much of our league dreams, bro, is like, we want people to be like, yo, hey, we see you. Like what you doing is like, it matters for not only us, but it matters for like young dudes that's going to look at you, that's going to see you. Like it matters for the type of like life you're living and things like that. It matters because like whenever people say your name, they ain't going to talk about your high school. They're going to talk about like, yo, like this dude made it to the league. Like they ain't pulling up. They may pull out high school film if you Derrick Henry, you slinging dudes. Right. They going to talk about college slinging dudes. They going to talk about you being in a league and slinging dudes.
Right.
So, like, at the end of the day, bro, it's about like, yo, like you so blessed to be in that moment because like people know who you are at the height of what you're doing.
Right.
And I know people talk about like I don't want to be at the best of my best when I'm young. Man,
Right.
that's why, like, yo, I'm 29 years old. I'm young. I want to be the best of the best 29-year-old me I can be.
Ooh, let them
Like,
know.
when I get 35,
Yeah.
I want to be the best of the best 35-year-old I can be.
Word.
And I'm like, why do I have to wait, or why do any of us have to wait to experience the best that any of us have to offer?
Right.
And I'm like, I'm reminded, bro, like this thing blessed me the other day, bro. Like,
Let's go.
hey, bro, I was reading Lucille Clifton, dog. And, you know, man, I'm a preacher, bro. So, like, I be listening to preachers close their sermons. And, you know, they be getting that little hum and that sing. And, like, bro, I'm in my truck, bro, and I'm in tears because I'm listening to, like, this preacher close his sermon text. And I'm about to have to stop on 20 and pull over and have me a little praise break, bro. And I'm listening to the joint, and I'm reading Lucille Clifton, and she says, like, yo, won't you come celebrate with me with the type of life I've made? I had no models. And I think about that text, bro, like when she says, won't you come celebrate with me? She's like inviting the reader, every single reader, whether you are like young, old, rich or poor, black, white, gay, straight, in the church, out the church. She's saying, won't you? And whoever that you is, like you be that you. And you come celebrate with me with the type of life I've made. And I think about this right now, like I feel so blessed in this moment because I got a whole squad celebrating.
No, you
I got a whole team celebrating.
No, you do.
And I'm like, dog, like when I think about once you come celebrate with me, it's like, bruh, like at so many moments playing sports, bruh, like from being a youngin' all the way through college, when my boys go to the league that I talk to constantly, at so many moments we trying to prove people that we matter. It's like, bro, I can run fast, I can jump high, I can get to the bag, I can get to the check. I want to prove that I can matter. And I'm like, right now, bro, this is like one of the only moments in my life where I was not trying to like prove people wrong who told me that I couldn't, but I had so many people that told me that I could, and I was willing to believe them. So like right now, it's like, won't you come celebrate with me with the type of life I've made?
Yeah.
I might not have had models for what this means, but I did have people speaking life into me.
Bruh, you got them shoulders going already, my G. Let's go. Woo! All right, listen, we got limited time. So this is why this is so wonderful to me, fam. Like you are family. You know, like you blood to me. And you also a preacher. Yeah. So I get to ask you questions that I want to ask like my blood, my people, my boy. But also I got some questions I want to ask the preachers because won't no other preacher step in front of me so I can ask them. So I'm gonna have a mix of those questions with you today, brother. And I feel like Shouting in the Dark necessitates these kind of questions that, you know, I think, you know, we'll feel like they're pushing you a bit because you push me. And I just want to jump into it, fam. Like one of the things you do in this book that I have never seen is you give rage the power to actually set your faith right. Right? What you write in this book is rage liberated me from my lies and gave me courage to see anew the present and future. Not Christianity, not necessarily blackness, though I think it is black rage, but rage. This is after you've already found Christ. You think you've already found, you know, blackness, but rage liberated you from your lies and gave you courage to see anew the present and future. Talk to me why rage did that and not Christianity.
Yeah, 100%, bro. Like so often when I think about the traditions that we are raised in and that what we inherit, you know, whether I was in the white church or whether I was in the black church, you know, so much of it didn't have no room for flesh and body.
Right.
You know, that's why Toni Morrison had to have Baby Suggs and Beloved preaching in the fields, in the clearing.
Yes.
Because, you know, in the institution, you know, you know, in some sense, you know, in the institutions and in the church, oftentimes, you know, the people who speaking in the clearing don't have, those are the people that are invisible and mute.
Right.
And so, like when I think about rage, I needed to talk about rage because I was so angry, number one.
Yeah.
I was so angry at what I had become. I was so angry at what the spaces I went into made me. I was so angry that I had become a weapon that was used against myself, that was used against people, that was used against my wife, that was used against others. I was so angry that I had given everybody so much of myself. And now I was just left with a blank page where I got to pick up the pieces and write a story. Like, we don't think about this oftentimes, but like when we create art and we write books, there's so many times I'm grateful for art, I'm grateful for book, but so much pain was made this thing possible, made heavy possible. And oftentimes, bro, like I felt like I didn't just want to talk about like how in pain I was, or even how in love I was, but so much of my own self-identity was about rage, this deep-seated anger, this deep-seated like not being okay with myself, not being okay with like the church, not being okay with theology, not being okay with, you know, with so much that was happening. And me being willing, as Audre Lorde say, bro, you know, I got to go to the text. I love the text.
You got to.
Hey, I'm a preacher, so I love the text, bro. I love the Bible, and I love black text. So like when I thought about two things in particular, you know, I'm gonna go literary mode, and then I'm gonna go Bible mode. So like when Audre Lorde writes in Sister Outside of the Use of Anger, and in that essay, The Transformation of Silence into Language, she ends that joint, which there are so many silences to be broken. Yeah. So what she's doing, that anger, that is rage, the use of anger, black and things like that. Like she's like, yo, like there is silence and muteness where so many people, so many bodies are bound, and so many bodies and so many stories are not told. So many people are destroyed because the institution don't have ways to love them, because to love certain demographics mean that you have to deal with power dynamics. So it's like, yo, I used to think that like proximity would change the way people talk about one another. I thought proximity would change perspective, but proximity don't change nothing if you ain't talking about power. Proximity don't change nothing if you don't talk about pain. Proximity don't change nothing if you ain't talking about the ways in which authority and truth and orthodoxy and the Bible and tradition have been used against us to hold on to insecurity and fear. So like rage was rooted in reading Audre Lorde, but it was also rooted in reading Nehemiah. And so in the Hebrew Bible, there's the story of Nehemiah. Brother is part of a colonized people. He's now in Babylon. He's a cupbearer to the king. He's reminded of his position in life. He gets word that, yo, your people are trying to rebuild that which was destroyed, and it ain't going too well. So in good fashion, brother says, hey, I gotta bounce. He goes to Jerusalem, and he sees things. And it says, this is the dope thing about the Bible, bro. You know, things can be problematic and powerful. It can be suspect and sacred. We got a lot of this up in the Bible.
We know that.
Hey, we'll deal with the problematic text, but let me get into the powerful text.
Let's go.
Nehemiah, he goes and sees what's going on. And he goes and he sees, and his people are dealing with like the second-class citizenship, where their bodies and their labors and their creativity is exploited on the altar of power. And it's done not just simply by the oppressor, but it's done by people who have been oppressed, who believe the lie that me being powerful in the same way that the oppressor was powerful would mean that my life will matter, and I can rebuild that which was broken, and I can sustain it. So they believe that the master's tools would not dismantle the master house, but they really believe that the master's tools would love us. And so Nehemiah is angry at this situation. And it says that the Bible says when he came onto them, he saw it, so he was aware, he was angry, then he brought charges. And so for me, rage, bro, was about a certain type of awareness of myself and my failure, awareness of the church and its failure, but being willing, as Jesus would do, to say the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come that you may have life, and life to the full. And that life meant, as Audre Lorde say, silence is being broken. And I wanted to break the silence in myself. I wanted to break the silence within the church. I wanted to break the silence within the Bible. I wanted to break the silence within the country, and try not to get broke in the process, because you know, we gotta be careful. You know, yes, we read the Salt Eaters. You know how you start heavy. Hey, baby, do you want to be well?
I don't know.
So I ain't trying. Hey, I want to upset some things, but man, more than anything, more than upsetting and responding to trauma and terror, I want us to be in love and free and whole, and not. So rage was a part of that.
And fam, like so much of this book is about carrying shame, often that wasn't yours to carry, right? And one of the things that you do early on in this text, and I haven't seen this done, fam, like that was so ironic about when you used Lord, like when you black preaching ass Dante used Lord, like when you use Lord, in the place that a lot of people would have put quote unquote the Lord, like, but it says a lot. But I'm interested, fam. This is one of these questions that I just be wanting to ask preachers who I think love us. Did you early on in your life as a Christian, as a preacher, have any shame about what white Christians were doing in your Christ's name?
Boy, you asked the best questions. That's so good, bro. I think in some sense, so much of how I lived was the very embodiment of shame. So shame was not just an experience, but for me, shame was an existence. And so much of, especially when we're thinking about the Bible and our traditions and the ways in which we think about embodying our faith, so much of it is built on this ability or inability to oftentimes be right and moral enough so that at some point in time, either in this moment or in the world to come, that I will finally fully be accepted. So as Alice Walker writes in The Color Purple, people think that all God cares about is what? Being pleased.
Right.
So like so many of us think that like it's about pleasing people and pleasing one another. And so like for me, when I got around white Christians, whether that was in college or whether that was in the white church, I mean, that shame and faith was in my Black upbringing. Like a lot of people think that the church, the Black church, is a space of liberation for everybody. Right. It might be that case if you're a cishet a Black male, that the church is a space of liberation. But if you're a Black woman, you're a Black LGBTQ, then oftentimes the church is not a place of liberation, but a place of the remembrance of loss. So how Disha did, in the Secret Lives of Church Ladies, where they're always being reminded where this is what we remember. This is what we remember. This is what we lost. And so that's the brilliance of it. It's like that oftentimes shame is like, in some sense, it's a universal religious experience. But when I went into white churches, I feel like it exacerbated the shame because nothing that I could have did when I actually was honest about what I felt and the terrible ways I was weaponized, nothing of what I could have did was enough to prove them that I matter as much as the Jesus they sung about every Sunday.
Yes.
So many of the white Christians were socialized and discipled from when they were young to want to protect the world that they want their children to inherit. So they were taught this, all the way back when we're talking about colonialism, if we're doing some history, because colonialism would not be what it was without the religious justification that was underpinning it.
Right.
It would not be what it was had not they had the Bible and this ideal of being made white as snow, and this idea of being saved, and this idea of being made human and mature and brought to the full knowledge of God, and things like that. So many white Christians for centuries have inherited this idea that the world that they build for their children and protect for their children matter way, way more than the world that kills us and harms us. And so when I'm inside of this space, bruh, like shame is like tithing, dog. Shame is like the auction and the collection plate.
Yes.
I give it away and I experience it, and I rarely, if ever, experience the benefit from it. I'm giving something to build another project, while I am oftentimes having to deal with what it means to give my last to people who don't give me their all. And so, like, when I think about shame can be on the one hand, I want to shame white Christians in the sense of like, this is what y'all have become, this is what y'all done. But I also want to shame Black people and what we become. So when I write in that chapter Womb, oftentimes we Black folk, we learned real early what bodies were meant to be loved and what bodies were meant to be hated. And we didn't learn in that chapter. White people didn't teach me that.
That's right.
That was what I learned in my Black Apostolic Pentecostal church.
That's right.
And so if shame was in some sense, this kind of expression of my faith and my experience growing up in the Pentecostal church, and then in some sense going into white churches, if it was my experience in a negative sense, I want to flip that joint on his head like Alice Walker did in Search of Our Mother's Gardens, and think about womanish. Like womanish was bad, but she turns it into something that loved the folk. And so for me, in some sense, shame was not just a negative in my life, but shame was the very thing that allowed me to see myself for who I was. In some sense, like as theologians speak of sin, as a power, it's not just individual acts, but oftentimes it's a power that one lives under. And many of them speak of alienation. So if I think of shame in that sense of a power to which I live under and a certain type of alienation from myself and from my community and from the people who made me, then shame also was that which gave me courage to deal with the alienation, to deal with what I had become, and to say, you need to change. Because, hey, bro, Octavia Butler, God has changed.
Family. But look here, this is my question to you.
Yeah.
You read Shouting in the Fire, you mixing it up with Octavia. I'm talking about on the textual level and subtextual level. You mixing it up with Lord. You mixing it up with Walker, Baldwin, Eddie Glaude, and Monty Perry. I think you see some reverberations of, I'm gonna actually say Robert Jones up in there. I see some of these. But a lot of these people, the church considers heathens. So in some way, it's like the heathen strike back. It's like, look at what these heathens have done to this disciple of Christ. Like these heathens brought this brother closer to Christ. But the tough question for me, and I think people reading the book, is actually this, I'm faking that, this isn't a tough question for me, but I think the tough question people reading the book is gonna be, why didn't this brother go the way of the heathens in terms of his relationship to the church? Like why, if the people who led this brother into a deep understanding of what faith and what love and what rigor really are, like, have been seen as outsiders by the church. Why didn't this brother walk with some of these people outside the church, but still carry some of the principles of the church with him? Hey, talk to me about that.
Oh, 100%, bro. Well, the beginning, I got to start with Baldwin, bro, in The Fire Next Time. When Baldwin deals with that second half of The Fire Next Time, Baldwin is criticizing not just white religion when he talks about if the concept of God, which comes off Baldwin's understanding of Christian history. Yes. That, if one is to be Christian, then we got to give up some stuff or whatnot. And this concept of God, in some sense, if it can't make us more loving, make us more larger, then we need to get rid of it. But also Baldwin was like, hey, bro, like the measure with which we love the Lord. He talking about black folk. He was talking about, when he ran, some other people ran to the street, some other people ran to the bottom. I ran to the pulpit or whatnot. I ran to the oil.
That's right.
That oftentimes, the measure with which we love ourselves was in some sense a measure with which we love the Lord, was a measure in which we distrust ourselves and hated ourselves. But then Baldwin would flip it on his head and say, there is no ethos like that coming together of them tired, weary souls,
right,
shaking in the name of the Lord. And so for me, it was about, being willing. Why didn't I give up on the church? Because in some sense, as the theologian Renita Weems would say, like there was so many people that needed to be free that was there. There were so many people that was still there. That's why I wrote it the way I did. Like I wanted to write an honest text, but I wanted to write a theological text because that's what I do. I do the Bible. I do black text. I do theology. I do church. I'm churchy.
Right.
So I didn't want to be as Renita Weems say, I didn't want to be cut off from that conversation. But there were so many more people that needed to be free, and things like that. And so just like Baldwin, Baldwin might have left the Pentecostal church, but he never left the pulpit. So I'm reminded of that picture where Baldwin is stern and he's holding on to the pulpit, and you see him in his suit, and it's a black and white photo that somebody made color. And then Baldwin is standing behind the sacred desk with his sacred black imagination, as a mature Black brother, as a mature Black gay brother in the church, in the name of the Lord, being willing to preach his sermon in front of a sign that says God is love. So Baldwin is saying, my body may not been accepted, but you cannot take away my brilliance. My body might have been bound, but you can't take away that which I experienced. And so for me, I felt like, dog, like the church made me, the church gave me so much. The church is what I love. I want to give my life to it. But also, like, I felt like, bruh, like I needed in some sense to be outside of the church. So I needed to be someone who brought, you know, church on the street within the pulpit. You know, I needed to see like, yo, there is a relationship between the pulpit, the pew, and the public. And whenever we dislodge that relationship from one another, whenever we dislodge from what we embody inside of our sermons and inside of our groups, from the real existential experiences of people out in the world, then we are missing, you know, the heart of Jesus. We're missing the best of our tradition. We're missing that which we can become. And bro, there's this story, bro, that I'll never forget. It shaped everything, dog. You know, I was talking to you earlier about, you know, illustrations that we take on the road that's just hitters. So there was this brother, you know, this brother from the UK, Anthony Reddy, who told this story of this Black professor giving a lecture. And he's given a lecture on, in some sense, he's given a lecture on Blackness and God and theology. And so he goes through a history. He starts doing, you know, critical theorizing about the body and about the flesh and about history. Then he goes to the text and he does all these things. And then he gives you a little bit of shimmy and shaking around the Bible, but then he also, you know, takes you to the poetry. He gets through the end and goes to the question and answer time. Young Black brother who done doggone went to one of the top schools in the UK. He gets up, right? Young brother gets up. You know, the UK full of white folk as well. You know, he gets up in this, he gets up in this environment, right? Hey, he gets up in this environment, right? And buddy, young Black brother say, you know, I loved your lecture. It was great and all that. And it was great. I love the way you did that. I resonate with it. He says, but when I became a Christian, I stopped being Black. The crowd goes in the uproar. They go in the uproar. They're celebrating. Yes, in the name of Jesus. The gospel matters and things like that. Then the crowd goes down and goes real silent. The professor gives a little laugh. He said, he asks a simple question. He said, when did Blackness become so bad that God must save you from it? That's why I don't give up on the church.
That's it.
That's why I don't give up on it.
But is there a way? Let me ask you this, bro. And this is another one of those questions that I always been wanting to ask Black preachers. You know, I grew up in the Black church, Christian missionary Baptist church, from the time I could walk till the time I didn't have to go. And I always, and I write through my relationship with the church, like the church and the porch and the relationships within that church, that will always be God to me. But fam, talk to me, convince me that it's not just Christ's behavior that we should model, but actually like a spectacular utterance that Christ is our Lord and Savior. Why can't just the model of Christ and the congregation that model can sometimes create, why can't that be enough? Push us there. Because you know that's one of the questions people gonna have. Like, I love what you're saying, Dante, but I don't know why I have to, you know, proselytize Christ in order to be who and what you think I should be. What do you say to that?
100%. For me, I'm saying I'm just gonna agree with you. You don't. That's simple. You know, I'm to the sweet. No, whatnot. And so for me, you know, when as you read about, bro, in the book, bro, like I went through so many different experiences within the context of my Christian faith. And at one point in time, bro, I used to be that person. Right. I had become a terrible, terrible human being to myself, to my wife, to Black people, to white people, to gay people, like, bro, to poor people, bro. I had become a terrible individual, and it was so much rooted in so much of the tradition I was existing in, and so much of the theology that I was immersed in and baptized in. And so when I thought there's a story in the Bible, man, that I love, I resonate with so deeply, bro, which kind of gets at the heart of this particular question and a certain type of question and experience that we know to be so true for so many people. The disciples are with Jesus, and there's this person healing in the name of Jesus, right? In the Bible, we don't get no social markers, we don't get no denominational markers, we don't get nothing, we don't get no theology check, we don't get no what this person, we don't even get if it's a dude, you know. Right. So I didn't correct myself. We don't even get we don't know anything about this person. And something like that. And I think one of the critical things to understand is that when we come to the biblical text, we need to realize there, like Audre Lorde say, there are so many silences that need to be broken, but we also need to let the silence speak to us, because in some sense, the silence of the Bible, or the silence of when we don't speak, allows us to imagine a little bit. And so this person is healing in the name of Jesus, and the disciples are angry. They're griping at Jesus. They tap Jesus on the shoulder, you know, and be like, "Hey, bro, hey, dog, like what's up with buddy? What are you on over here, bro? Like what buddy on? Like he ain't like one of us. He ain't doing this." And Jesus says, you know, if they're not for us, if they're not against us, then they're for us. And so for me, that story is so powerful and instructive in this point, because Jesus does not go over to that person and tell them you're doing it the wrong way. Jesus does not he does not criticize the person that's without, but he is criticizing the community that's within. And I think we need a certain type of critical questioning of that question. Well, I would say you don't have, some communities feel like, yo, in order for you to feel like your faith matters, you got to put somebody else down. Somebody else may be saved. Must be saved. But as I remember Baldwin talking about in To Crush a Serpent, Baldwin is like, salvation is as near as their breath. He says that nobody can talk about salvation without love. And salvation is not in some sense fear of the wrath of God, but is reciprocating the love of God. And the last time I checked, bro, to be created in the image of God is to be loved by God, and to be, and in some sense, to have value in the eyes of God. It is the church, oftentimes, it is many of us who have learned that love must always be a fight. Love must always be an argument. Love must always, in some sense, in so many of our minds, must be like this kind of dogma and doctrine. And what I wanted to try and do in some sense is love in my book is like love, and the love that we want to embody should be as normal and as ordinary as being alive. Yes. And being free. And I think, bro, like that's the tradition that I resonate with. And Jesus, he don't protect himself, you know, from bad Christians. Right. And that's the thing. We would imagine that when Jesus prayed in the Bible, you know, like, yo, like, let them be unified. We would imagine like, yo, let everything be well. But he don't protect himself or us from them. Yeah. It allows us to imagine better for ourselves. And for me, bro, like, I want to try and imagine that better. And that better imagine that I want to do is not just reducing faith or life or love simply to a fight or a war for control. But I wanted to imagine it as normal and as powerful as being here right now in this moment, talking about Black text, Black worlds, Black beauty and creativity.
Yes, indeed. And, you know, one of the things you do, I'm going to try to speed myself up a bit because we got some people who want to get to you. One of the things you do, fam, is, you know, you understandably see these Americanisms or American orthodoxies. And one of the things you say about one of them in the book is, if there's anything exceptional about this nation, this is speaking on American exceptionalism, if there's anything exceptional about this nation, it's the exceptional way we've gone about lying to ourselves. And then you say prayer is our last defense, right? I wonder if you can talk about why and how prayer is our last defense and connect that to the exceptional way we in this nation go about lying to ourselves, and what space prayer gives you and can give other people.
100%. Like when I think about this whole kind of lies and myths that lies at the heart of our nation, bro. And when I was talking about exceptionalism, bro, I was thinking about like the stories that give Americans meaning. Right. and the crisis, as Sadia Hartman would say, that I too live in a time of slavery, and by which I mean that we're still living in a time of the crisis of citizenship.
Yeah.
And so, like, this nation is still confused, as is the church, about what it wants of itself, who matters, whose story will be able to be told, what people can exist in a country that's still confused about its own self. That's why, the Constitution need amendments, because we still trying to ask questions, ask
Right.
better questions about, what will guide our country, and
Right.
things like that. And so, like, when I thought about like this nation, and even like when I was writing that chapter, bro, was like in the heart of like in 2020. It was in the heart of like coronavirus and COVID and the pandemic and death and suffering and hatred and like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many people who were just being like abused and used, bro. Like prayer for me, bro, was me saying like, bro, prayer is my only last hope, because like everything else I've tried, even with everything else I've tried, even with my art, cannot open the gate to love. And that is the tough part about is that it will not and cannot, and oftentimes can fail at accomplishing that which we believe to be the best of the world and best we have to offer. Prayer for me was a sort of type of intimacy. Like this book, I wanted to be read as a prayer, as a certain type of imagining what can be possible for us, but actually being honest about what ails us, but we're being willing to let go of things that I hold dear, to say whatever is left in the process, through pandemic, through police brutality, through pain, through struggle, whatever is left, all I have in this moment to offer is myself, what I believe to be true of this faith life, and what I believe to be possible for each one of us in getting better and becoming more alive. So I want to pray against a country that does not want us to be Black and alive. And so for me, prayer is about letting go, but also getting better and more mature. And I think that's what this nation needs. It needs more mature, as you say. More mature, more honest, more creative people and creative art. So yeah.
And you use this sentence, and I want to use this sentence to sort of guide us into the question answer today. But you use this phrase in this sentence, like catching our breath, right? Like in the briefs and in the breath section, catching our breath. So I want to make sure we come back to that. But I think this question of catching our breath, it can guide us into some of these questions that are being asked today in the question and answer. So the first one from Raina says, how do we let go of the stigma around Black rage and actually access it?
Yeah, 100.
I'm so concerned about being seen as an angry Black person. I sometimes think I don't know how to feel that anger without fighting. I'm not sure if it's Raina or Rana, but might be Rana. I'm so concerned about being seen as an angry Black person. I sometimes think I don't know how to feel that anger without fighting it. That's the first, John.
Well, first and foremost, I want to just acknowledge your vulnerability for even asking that question, for even holding space for that in this moment. And I want to just say, yo, I see you, and I acknowledge you, and like what you're feeling is right and true. I don't know who told you, like somebody may have told you that that was wrong, but I want to tell you that that's right. And I could not be who I am without it. So like for me, Black accessing rage was first and foremost like looking at myself in the mirror. Like I can't change anything in anybody else if I'm not willing to face that which I don't like in myself. So rage is as much about self-love and self-respect as much as it is about changing the world that we live in. And so for me, it was about going to Black tech. So I'll never forget the thing that changed me was like reading June Jordan's joint in Technical Difficulties, Where's the Rage? And she said that like in the 60s, the thing of the 60s that we can't forget is the justice of our rage. So it's like you have to first acknowledge that your rage is right and true,
Mm.
but you also have to allow your rage to allow you to access something alternative. Because if rage is not given an alternative, then bitterness set in. And when bitterness set in, as Baldwin would say, you can't create no art, you can't live, because everything you think about yourself is in response to what other people think about you. So
Right.
then, like, accessing that is being honest about it, but you got to be willing to use it in the best ways possible. So that's probably the way I think
I
about
feel
it.
that. I feel that. Yeah, we got three bangers up in here. So let's make sure we get to these. All right, from the great Reginald Bailey. You mentioned earlier that you love the text, biblical and literary. How significant of a role has African American literature played in how you continue to shape your thoughts around religion theology? And that's one of the most incredible threads in that book, fam. Like I want to hear you kind of wax on this for a bit. How significant of a role has African American literature played in how you continue to shape your thoughts around religion and theology?
Bet. So, like, I'm gonna use like a little philosophy word real quick. So, like, in order for me, like, to do what I did, like, I had to get an alternative epistemology. So I
Yeah.
need a new type of way of seeing and naming and understanding the world, that will, as Terrion Williamson write in her joint Scandalize My Name, where that would take seriously that Black world making as much a starting point for thinking about the world as any other place. So, like, when I started reading like James Baldwin and James Cone, and as like literally my four inspirations sit right here: James Cone, Katie Cannon, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison. When I started reading Black texts, I wanted to, as a theologian, and I use that very loosely, but I am doing theology work. Like, I wanted to ask, okay, hey, what can be discerned and articulated by doing a close reading of Black texts as canonical texts when it comes to my sacred Black imagination? So I was like, yo, if there can be a book of Jeremiah and Isaiah, and that we Christians inherit these books out of the Hebrew Bible, and there are names associated with those Bibles that we say there is divine revelation there is meaning there, then I wanted to, as a writer, as a thinker, go to the book of Baldwin, the book of Toni K. Baldwin, go to the book of Nella Larson, go to the book of Audre Lorde, Jordan and Jean Toomer, and all these brilliant Black writers. I wanted to say, what can be learned by going to their book and reading their books as sacred texts? And sacred text is just simply those collection of texts that any given community gives authority to shape our meaning, our identity, our concepts, our visions of the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to say, I find meaning in the biblical text the same way I find meaning in the Black text. And so, yeah, and I'm doing my thesis work on reading James Baldwin as theologian. So much of my academic work centers around the intersections of Black text theory and theology. So that's probably the way I started thinking about that.
And this is a connected question, fam, from KJ. Do you bring Clifton Baldwin, Lord, and others into your sermons? If so, how do the congregants respond?
Well, yeah. So like the role I'm serving in right now is less about sermonizing and more about building. So the last time I preached, it was this year, or whatnot. I always weave, Black text within whatever I preach. But I'm serving more in a role of like building alongside. I'm a digital minister now, or whatnot. I was going to be campus pastor, but the pandemic happened, we couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm about, like, I create a lot of content with my pastor and things like that. So I am more so like, I haven't preached in a little minute, but I preach all the time. And so in a sense, but I weave, Black text into that because I feel like, we need, the preaching moment is about celebration and learning and things like that, but it's also about introduction and invitation. And so I think people do receive it because we do. Black folk have such a familiarity with our lingo, with our language, and with people in our history and in our stories, that just is like normal. So like, if like, as people write about that the Bible is a talking book, then in some sense Black voices are, the continuation of talking back to like the Bible, of whatnot, week in and week out. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Rabia, tough one. Yeah, an interesting use of verb tense here. How did you separate Christianity's colonial history from your belief in it?
Yeah, that's a tough text. Tough question. And I don't know if anybody can purely do this.
Right.
Like I would imagine that there are parts of my Christianity, that are reminiscent of the ways in which Christianity took form, in the colonial context, and even in the and the world in which the colonial context built. So the thing that I tried to do, particularly if there was going to be any type of separation, I needed, as I said earlier, alternative epistemologies, which is reminiscent of what the late Charles Mill, God rest his soul, wrote in his philosophy paper entitled Alternative Epistemology. It meant like knowing history, knowing like the worst of our tradition, because there's no such thing as a singular Christianity. There
right.
are Christianities, multiple traditions of Christianity, of which some are better, more healthier than others. And for me, trying to dislodge myself from that colonial Christianity was like going to the womanists and Black feminists, Black literary tradition, so that like whatever I would become a year, 2 years from now, 10 years, 50 years from now, if God allowed me to see that, or whatnot, would be better than the world and the faith that the colonial context built. So in some sense, there's no perfect journey in that, but I'm trying every day to try and dislodge myself either knowingly or unknowingly.
Yeah, and this is I want to get this one in before we get the reading list question. This one was in the chat from Christine Crawford. How does the Black church reconcile / move forward from its own use as a weapon by the evangelical church? How does the Black church reconcile / move forward from its own use as a weapon by the evangelical church? I guess we should start by asking if you agree with the premise.
I agree with that. No, I agree with that 100% because I was that person.
Yes.
We'll read about, I was the Black person in the white church, that was a weapon. I had become a weapon.
Right.
Become somebody who was anti-Black. I have become somebody who devalued what we offered in the world and believed that being closer to white people was being closer to God, and that listening to white people's voice was listening to the voice of Jesus. I think, that this can the Black church be dislodged from the weaponization and the exploitation of white evangelicalism? Maybe or maybe not, in some sense. Like maybe you may hear my son going ham upstairs.
He's getting it in, ain't
he? It's bedtime, so hey, just life. That's it. Or whatnot. So I think the only way that can happen, and I would caution us to think that like that is happening in as big a scale like as we think, because there are Black churches, country churches, or churches that's in the city. There are many Black churches that's not, bound to whiteness or anything like that, who grew up out of our own institutions. But the ones who are exploited by white evangelicalism, the only way I think that would change is if we divest from Black performances that exceptionalize us in ways that exploit like what we have to offer. And we got to divest from them. We got to stop censoring them. Like this is what kind of pisses me off about so much of religion reporting. I'm like, don't nobody give a damn about what white Christians think.
Right.
Like, why do we give so much about, why do we care so much about what white people think? Like every time people think about Christianity religion reporting, it's always white evangelicals.
Yeah.
I'm saying we need to report a little bit differently. We need to think a little bit differently and the likes, and we need to read a little bit differently and be willing to be like, nah, that ain't for me. Wherever I'm going to land, it ain't going to be in white churches or white spaces.
Mm-hmm. One of the most beautiful things you do in this book for me as someone who makes books is you don't allow the word and words of God to simply carry the sentence. You realize early in that book that formidably crafted sentences like need to carry the complicated sort of fleshiness of where you've been. And so when somebody asked about a suggested reading list, what's interesting to me is like the book in and of itself is a reading list, right? Like you narrate your encounters with so many of these texts. And in so what I see you doing also is imitating some of what you encounter, but those imitations put next to each other create something wholly innovative and new. So I wonder if you can talk about that, what I just said, but also speak to this idea of like, you have a suggested reading list to follow the book.
Yeah, 100%. I'll talk about the first one. I mean, second question, then I'll kind of end with the last one, because this is actually one of my favorite things to talk about is crafting,
Yeah.
or whatnot. And by the time I got to the end of the book, by the time everybody got to, we catch our breath again, I wanted them to be like, golly, that dude can write. Like, I wanted them to be like, dang, like he good that way he do. Like he be trying or whatnot.
Yeah.
So like, but then like, I put out and if you follow me on social media, I put out a reading list and a book list, a reading list and a playlist, or whatnot that is really kind of helped get me through. But like to the first question, bro, like I wanted as a writer, bro, to be a part of a noticeable tradition. Yes, I'm a preacher. Yes, I'm in ministry, but I wanted people to think about me as a writer first and foremost. I wanted them to feel the honesty and the vulnerability of Heavy. I wanted them to feel the world making of the city we became. I wanted them to feel the complexity of humanity from Men We Reap. I wanted them to feel the ways in which I prayed and then sermonized like the fire next time. I wanted them to feel the clearing and the church and the dancing and the brilliance that they experienced when they read Baby Suggs in Beloved. I wanted them to feel the way like, yo, when I drop nigga, like the way Mateo did in Black Book, like
yes,
I wanted them to laugh
yes,
when they read my text, bro. I wanted them to feel the ways in which we oftentimes are confused, just like Nella Larson wrote the confusion within the text. I wanted them to feel the ways in which we lost so much as people inside and outside the church, as Disha wrote in The Secret Lives. I wanted them to feel the beautiful language of the prophets and the ways in which even when we're in the worst of circumstances, even when we're in the worst of life, we can still find love. I wanted them to feel all of that. And I wanted them to say, like, as my friend, Dr. Chaniqua Walker Barnes writes in her beautiful, beautiful book, that Danté Stewart brings the voices of his people. That's what you're going to feel. And that's, when you talk about, when you say that my book is a reeling list, I wanted it to be that way. Yes, you're going to read about Danté Stewart, but you're going to read about a lot of people as well. And you're going to read about the ways in which those people, as you have, Kiese, made me who I am. I ain't no self-made brother. I come from the fullness of the goodness of the Lord, but I come from the fullness as well of the goodness of Black people to me and what I could become. So yeah.
I love you deeply, bro. Like deeply, deeply, deeply. Yeah, you did it. We gonna have to hug some point. We got to find time to hug, fam. You brought it out tonight, and this is not the end. Let people know where they can see you next. Also, we want to thank Strand for putting this out, giving us opportunity to build. It's probably a different Friday night than a lot of y'all anticipated, but yo, it's Dante. This is Danté Stewart right here. So please get your book from Strand or wherever you get books from. Dante, you want to say anything else before we get up out of here?
Yeah, you was asking where they can see me next. So I got some dope IG lives coming up with Achille. I'm gonna have something with AJ. I mean Black Bustagram. Shout out to Black Bustagram.
Always.
Brilliance of just what so many of them have done and are doing for us and our art, and creating space where we don't have to be like perfect, or we don't have to be like official, but we can just hop on lives and things like that. So I got some stuff coming with Black Bustagram, but also tomorrow, if anybody on this live is anywhere near Augusta, I'm gonna be at the Book Tavern tomorrow in person, doing a reading much like this and talking about my text. And then the next one I'll be with bookstore events is I'll be in conversation with Robert on the 21st, bruh. Yes, Lord. I'll be in conversation at the book passage. So, yeah, Strand, thank y'all for creating this environment. Thank you for taking a chance on me as a first-time writer. Thank you for holding space for me, and I'm really grateful and feel very blessed for this opportunity.
Just thank you. That was such a fantastic conversation. It took me to church. It was great.
Mhm.
Uh, and thank you, Kiese, for fantastically moderating as always. To our audience, thank you for joining us tonight. I've dropped links in the chat. So if you haven't purchased Shoutin in the Fire, you can just go to strandbooks.com or click on the link. You can also go to strandbooks.com to pick up Kiese's heavy and long division. On that note, thank you everyone and have a fantastic Friday night.